Maundy Thursday marks the final countdown to Jesus' last days on earth, his arrest, his crucifixion, and ultimately his resurrection. It is usually not the most joyous of feasts. Even the word Maundy even the word Maundy, which comes from the Latin word for commandment, sounds gloomy. It sounds like a word Eeyore would say a lot. Are you familiar with Eeyore? The pessimistic donkey from the Winnie the Pooh books? Can't you picture Eeyore saying, "Maundy, Maundy," in his gloomiest voice, and then he'd sigh and shake his head? The Lord's Supper is a reverent event, but it should never be a gloomy event. In fact, in the early church, the celebration would get a bit too festive. I read recently about a church that was celebrating communion. During the children's communion, the minister was talking about communion and what it is all about. The Bible talks of Holy Communion being a joyful feast, he said. What does that mean? Well, joyful means happy, right? And a feast is a meal. So a joyful feast is a happy meal. And what are the three things we need for a happy meal? One young man replied enthusiastically, hamburger, fries, and a regular soft drink. Now, I believe that young man would be right at home in the church of Corinth. Their celebration of the Lord's Supper would get a bit too festive, and it would also be a bit excessive as well. Exclusive. It would also be a bit exclusive as well. Paul wrote the church in Corinth a letter. Among other things, he was upset with the way they were worshiping. It was the practice at the time for believers to get together for worship, then share a meal afterwards, and celebrate the Lord's Supper as part of that meal. But the Corinthians missed the point entirely. They got together for worship, and they broke off into their own little cliques based on status and wealth. They would eat their meals with their friends, but not share with the whole congregation. Randall Metz tells about a woman who helped prepare the communion elements for his church's worship. As this woman placed the chalice on the altar, her little nephew pointed at the beautiful cup and said, "Wow, who's going to get that trophy?" Yeah, the Corinthian believers acted as if the Lord's Supper was like a trophy. Only a few people got to take part. Everyone else was shut out. The wealthy believers would bring a lot of food, but only share it with a select few, leaving the poorer brothers and sisters to go hungry. Some people gorged themselves on food. Some people even got drunk. Paul expressed his displeasure with their practices in chapter 11, verse 20. So then, when you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper you eat. Paul tries once again in verse 23 to 26 to explain to the Corinthian believers what the Lord's Supper really means, why it matters. "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it, in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" When we come together to celebrate the Lord's Supper, what does our worship proclaim? Are we proclaiming thanks to God for Jesus' sacrifice that has swallowed up death and victory? Are we proclaiming that the new covenant in Jesus' blood gives us access to God? Are we proclaiming to the world that Jesus is coming again to restore creation? The Lord's Supper is such a powerful sacrament. It doesn't matter when or where it is celebrated. What does matter very much is the how and the why. There are three essential elements of which the Lord's Supper reminds us. First of all, it reminds us of Christ's death and resurrection. And that, of course, was an ultimate act of love that should bring joy to our hearts. Father Andrew M. Greeley tells about a young woman who had become very scrupulous about the Eucharist. She was afraid that the priest was careless about distributing communion and permitted tiny bits of the elements to fall on the floor around the altar rail. After Mass, she would sneak up to the altar and collect what she thought might be parts of the elements in which Jesus was still present. She would pick them up and with a little spoon that she carried in her purse and then place them in a little plastic bag. Believing as she did that these scraps contained little bits of Jesus, she didn't know what to do with them. So she brought them home and created a little altar in her room where she could pray to Jesus. Her parents thought it was a nice act of devotion. And finally, one morning, the priest caught her collecting bits of the Eucharist from the floor. Greatly embarrassed, she tried to explain what she was doing. The priest, who understood how young people can become obsessive, took the plastic bag from her and promised that he would wash it out in the special sacristy sink. But Martha, he said, Jesus comes to us in the Eucharist to be with us because he loves us, not to drive us crazy with fears. And that's true. When we hear those beautiful words, do this in remembrance of me, we need to be reminded more than anything how much God loves us. But we also need to be reminded of how much Christ loves all the people of the world. That Christ died for the sins of the whole world. This is a universal sacrament. Dr. Leslie D. Weatherhead was one of the most respected religious figures of the 20th century. He once described for us a communion service in his old church in Madras, India. He pictured at the communion a converted Buddhist and his family, a converted Brahmin, a young fellow who was born a Mohammedan, that's a tough one, a Mohammedan, a leper, a person who was rejected by the society at large, a prosperous English businessman, a Davidian student, a Syrian Christian, the colonel of the regiment, an Indian lawyer, as well as a professor at the university. This sounds like a really bad joke to me. Mm-hmm. The table of Christ, he reminded us, is a table for people of all nations, all races, all strata of society. No one is excluded. A Lutheran pastor named Nadise Boyes Weber tells of receiving a phone call one Sunday morning from Rachel, a member of her church. Rachel was sobbing as she told her pastor that on her visit back to her hometown, the pastor at her parents' church had refused to let Rachel take communion. The young woman was heartbroken. When Nadia shared Rachel's story with other members of the church that morning, one immediately responded, well, then we'll have to take her communion at the airport when she gets home. It was a no-brainer. When Rachel got off the escalator at the Denver International Airport a few days later, she was greeted by a church member holding a sign. On one side of the sign, it read Rachel, and on the other side, the words, Child of God. Pastor Nadia led Rachel upstairs to the small airport chapel where she and a few other church members were waiting at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night to share communion with one of their sisters. We are reminded finally that we are a family. We are responsible for one another. Don't forget that at the center of our worship is a cross and a table, a family table. A man from Mississippi named Jim Young tells about a woman with legs twisted from 2 gruesome automobile accidents, walking unsteadily to the altar for Holy Communion. Holding tightly to each pew along her route, her expression discouraged offers of assistance. Yes, her eyes seemed to say, it is a struggle, but I intend to make it on my own. Suddenly, someone nudged her from behind. The person who touched her was someone else struggling to make it. Someone who did not see the expression that discouraged others from helping. It was someone who was blind. The woman with the twisted legs allowed the woman who was blind to take her arm. As they struggled to the altar, something happened. The unsteady one became the eyes for the blind who supported her. They reached the altar together, and they shared the sacrament instituted by Jesus Christ, who healed the lame and made the blind to see. The table of Christ is a family table. We are a family. That means we are responsible for one another. In 1969, atheist activist Madeleine Murray O'Hair filed a lawsuit against NASA to prohibit its astronauts from practicing any religious ceremonies or reciting prayers or reading the Bible while on their voyages to the moon. Astronaut Buzz Aldrin, a devout Presbyterian, had been praying about some symbolic act of faith he could perform on the Apollo 11 mission to land on the moon. he got permission from his denomination's elders to serve himself the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, in space. But Aldrin knew he had to keep it quiet. Before Buzz Aldrin and pilot Neil Armstrong stepped out of the lunar module on July 20th, 1969, Aldrin unwrapped a small plastic container of wine and some bread. In his book, Magnificent Desolation, he shares the message he then radioed to NASA. I would like to request a few moments of silence and to invite each person listening in, wherever and whomever they may be, to pause for a moment and contemplate the events of the past few hours and to give thanks in his or her own way. During this period of silence, Aldrin prayed and ate the bread and drank the wine. As he would write in the 1970 article for Guideposts magazine, it was interesting to think that the very first liquid ever poured on the moon and the very first food eaten there were communion elements. In just a minute, you'll be coming forward to this altar to receive the bread and the cup, just like believers all over the world will be doing, in massive cathedrals, in little tin roof shacks, in house churches, in prisons, in military chapels, in hospital beds. The meaning of this meal doesn't change. It hasn't changed in over 2,000 years, no matter where or when we celebrate it. So before you come up here to partake of it, please ask yourself, why are you coming forward? What are you proclaiming? I hope you're reminded of Christ's death and resurrection, the ultimate act of love that brings joy to our hearts. I hope you are also reminded of how much Christ loves all of the people of the world. And I hope you are reminded that we are a family. We are responsible for one another. This is the Lord's table, and we are his family. Thank God for that. Amen.
Amen.
Following the way of Christ, we are going to wash one another's feet. This is a vulnerable activity that requires humility and reminds us of the ways we are to serve one another and the world. So you can see I don't have my stole on. Foot washing asks us to forget about things like smelly feet, who is the greatest and who is the least. It invites us to think about how we give something to others and in turn receive something from them. All right, is it warm or is it cold?
Oh, it's cold.
Good. I'm burning up.
That's a shock.
We put cold water in there.
It's not a bad thing. You know, cold water's good for the body.
Is it?
Yeah.
Until it gives you a heart attack.
They've actually been saying that taking a cold shower is actually healthy for you
But
every so
not
often.
cold. I'm not talking about ice cold.
That's what they're talking about. They're talking about. They've found that people who jump into the ice cold lakes and stuff,
They're crazy is what they are.
they end up somehow being. There are health benefits that can come from it.
Okay.
Now you see why I've got shoes with no laces.
Yeah, I know. I do too, but I just, that's... I always find one shoe.
Yeah.
Always. That's why I put that rack in there. Look at that. Oh, my feet are all scribbled up.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Go. Go. Oh. Woo. It's cold.
Your foot looks swollen.
It probably is. I've been on my feet all day. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Take that stuff in. Yeah. We make sure we don't drink any of that. Don't put it in the fish water either. It might not be good for them. All right. All right, be seated for some quick announcements. All right. What did we come up with this time?
I just kind of did our normal.
Compliments, concerns, suggestions, or complaints.
Oh my God, you did it right this time.
See, I have to get real tired to get it right, I guess, and get real close to it so I can read it. It's feedback at DallasULC.com. It's feedback at DallasULC.com. Pretty self-explanatory. Any of those four things or anything you need to talk to us about, feedback at DallasULC.com. Join your church and leave a legacy of helping others. If you have not done so, please go and download the Pray.com app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. This is a place where you can, I put a prayer there every day, or a prayer or a Bible verse. It's just a way for you to know that I'm praying for you and hope that you're praying for me. And a way to keep in touch is that's one place where you can go and tithe with your credit card or your bank account. You don't have to have cash every Sunday, and if you know, it's all, you can do it automatically also, so you don't have to remember it every Sunday. Boom, there you do. It's automatically done on Sunday. Your tithing is done, which is very, very important to our church. Okay. Request for prayer. Pray at DallasULC.com. Pray at DallasULC.com. We pray every day here at Dallas Universal Life Church, so you can send us an email and request for us to pray for you during the week. Any kind of request that you have for prayer. You can choose to remain anonymous or give us your name. You can also choose to have us pray for you on Sundays here at the church and have your prayer be put into our prayers of intercessions and prayed for by the entire congregation. Again, you can choose to remain anonymous or lose your name. Simply just write us at pray@dallasULC.com. Also, we offer our services, our masses, if you will, for dedication. And this does not have to be just for somebody who's passed on, which is a misconception of many. It's an honor to have a mass or a service said in your name. They're great for birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, just anything, just to say I love you. You can do all of that. All we ask that you do is to send a small donation to help cover the costs of the service. And you can let us know about that too. Ask any information you want to know about that at pray@DallasULC.com. Okay.
We need to record like pre-done segments for these days when it's just us.
I don't mind it. I don't mind. It's good practice.
Podcast.
Did you know we had a podcast? Did you know we had a podcast?
We hope you do.
Folks, for you out there in Cyberland, I'm not speaking to anybody here. We had a no-show tonight for service. It was a long day. We had a Chrism Mass this morning, which was very long, and so you know it's the middle of the week. It's a Thursday. It's not a normal day when people come to church. We get that. I understand that. It's it's Maundy Thursday. People don't really understand, and that's okay. People have their lives, and I get that. That's fine. Hopefully they'll catch us on the podcast or catch us on YouTube. But I just want to let you know. I'm not trying to deceive you here. There's nobody else here. It's just me and Deacon Partain. But we are celebrating the sacrament and reverently, with its due respect. Okay. But we do have a podcast you got to check out. All right. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's better than watching it. I think it's better than watching it on YouTube. It's also different than being here in person. If you haven't been here in person, I suggest you do that too. Come on by. Come to the church. Check us out. Learn who we are by every aspect. But back to the podcast. If you want to hear our podcast, all you got to do is go to one of these providers here. Listen on Google Podcasts, Anchor, TuneIn, Overcast, Breaker, Castbox, Radio Public, Podbean, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or simply go to the internet and type Your Path with Bishop Mark. Just do a search for Your Path with Bishop Mark. I have to be careful the way I say that because the bishop part kind of can get caught on my teeth and not come out right. We need volunteers. This is an announcement for all people that can help us. We are a society, a church of volunteers. None of us take a paycheck here. This is all voluntary, and we need more help. So if you're out there in Cyberland or wherever, go and help us. Something has to be done. There's always something that needs to be done here at the church. Always, always, always. Something. There's just not enough hours in the day for who we have here to finish it. So we always need more help. There's always something to do. So please come on by. Help us out. On that note, there it is. Anchor.fm/bishopmark/support. Anchor.fm/bishopmark/support. Like I said, we are a church of volunteers, which means we also don't make a lot of money. The church isn't making a lot of money either. We rely on donations to keep our doors open, and this is a great way for you to do that. You can actually donate through our podcast, supporting our podcast, and thus supporting us. There are three levels of donation here: 99 cents a month, $4.99 a month, or $9.99 a month. All of them are the same. They don't do anything different. They help us keep our doors open, help us to continue to bring you our podcast every week, or like this week, 5 times this week. 5 services we're doing this week.
From Sunday to Sunday.
Right, 5 services. So it costs money. It costs money to have these lights on. It costs money to have these clothes. It has money to have the equipment, which we're in desperate need of some new equipment. It's getting rough. It costs. Deacon Partain drives here, and he doesn't live real close, and he gets here. When he comes for a couple days and spends it with us helping prepare and get ready because it's a lot of work. Even when there's nobody here, we still have the service for ourselves and for you out there watching and listening to us in the world. And we need your support. In order for us to keep our doors open, we have to have volunteers, but we also have to have donations. And without that, we will no longer be here. So please, I ask you, go to anchor.fm/bishopmark/support and help us if you can. Okay. Fair Park is coming up. It's, 44 days away. I'm not going to plead on this one too much. We're going to be marching in the Gay Pride Parade for the first time ever this year, and also for the first time ever in Dallas. It's going to be held at Fair Park and not in the Oak Lawn area. So it's kind of a big deal. I really want the church to kind of thrive and really show a good sign. So I'm asking anybody out there, you want to come march with us? Come on. You know, it's an experience you'll never forget. It's a lot of fun, and you're supporting your brothers and sisters as well as supporting this wonderful church. So it's on June the 2nd, and if you'll just check our website for more information or send us an email. Okay. That's going to do it. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. This one gets me. Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, we've gotten through a lot of it. You know, here, and here. Those are the 3 services we've done. So we're through the midway point now. We've made it through half of it. We had Palm Passion Sunday. We had the Chrism Mass this morning, and then we were just finishing up the Maundy Thursday Mass. Tomorrow, of course, is Good Friday, the most solemn day of any Christian. And it's my favorite day of the church year. So please join us for Good Friday and the Good Friday services celebrating the trial, crucifixion, and death of Jesus Christ. Tomorrow at 5:30 here, or sorry, 6:30 here at the church. Then, of course, on Easter Sunday at 5:30. So you can have time to go. We're not going to have it at 3, like we normally do service on 3 on Sunday. We do it at 5:30 because it's Easter. We want you to go spend time with your family and have your dinners and do what you got to do. And hopefully by 5:30 you're finished up. You can have service with us, have a round table with us, and then have a heck of a potluck supper. I'm hoping the sign-up thing kind of did not. I mean, we just kind of all I think forgot about it. So I'm hoping everybody shows up and brings something for the potluck. Or shows up. They better show up because if they don't, I've got some really, really good food that I'm going to be eating for a while. So no, it'll be a lot of fun. So hey, if y'all are out there too and y'all see this, come on by. All right. I think that does it now.